Whoa. Welcome back to Conversations, where we share my connections, stories, and key learnings in hopes of giving back to the next generation. If you like what we put together today, please like, comment, subscribe to show your support. Let's roll. I'm here with an extra special guest today, somebody that's played a key role in getting my career kicked off, and an advocate for women in leadership. Previously held a president title at the largest staffing agency in the world. Currently holds a president title at the largest industrial staffing agency in the U.S. My friend Janelle Bieler.
Skyler, thank you so much for having me. This is exciting to be able to do this with you.
I think it's been like 15 years since I've seen you.
I know.
It's
15
crazy.
years since we worked together, which is insane.
Insane. Just before we get started, I just wanted to take the opportunity to kind of stop and really say thank you. I don't know if you realize the impact you've had on my life and my career. Do you remember the day we met?
I do. Do you want to tell the story, or can I tell the story?
Go ahead. I'd love to hear it from your perspective, because I've been telling it.
I was shopping for a TV before the Super Bowl. I had just moved to Portland, and my husband and I, husband now, but boyfriend at the time, walked into Sears, and you walked up and offered to help us. And, usually being in sales myself, I'm always like, no, I don't want to talk to the sales guy that's going to try to sell me. Let me do my own thing. And you were so respectful. You came up, you talked to us, and then you kind of walked away. And I was like, oh my gosh, he has a really good approach. I really liked that. And we ended up talking to you. We ended up buying a TV.
Yeah.
And we walked out of there, and I was hiring salespeople. And Drew, my husband, was like, I think you should hire that guy. I was like, I think I should too.
Yeah.
He was awesome, right? I'm like, that was really, really good. Anyway, so that's how I remember it. I'd love to hear it from your perspective, because I don't think we've ever talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you this. My pastor used to tell this story about his son that was a pizza delivery guy. Yeah. And his son was really hard on himself for being a pizza delivery guy. And he always used to tell his son, do this job as if it was the job you wanted. And someday you're going to make a connection with somebody that gives you that opportunity. And so that was always kind of my approach in the stores. And, to have you come back, I'll never forget you coming back up the elevator and giving me your business card. And, you fast forward and, my career has been better than anything I could have ever imagined. And it started with you giving me an opportunity. And, I did the work. I remember I worked my first 77 days in that job, and just because I didn't want to let you down for that opportunity, and made a sale every day. And
you did.
It just, I think about now with my girls and the traveling I've gotten to do, and some of the career milestones that I've hit. And, it really did start with you giving me that opportunity. And I'm just so grateful. And I wanted to tell you that.
That's amazing. Well, thank you, because when I brought you into that role, I use your story actually quite a bit too, to talk about what happens when you recognize raw talent and you find somebody that does want to work hard and drives, because you were the best salesperson that I hired. Which is incredible. You did not let me down.
I know.
And it's been really gratifying for me too, to see the rise in your career and kind of see where you've taken that. So congratulations.
All right. So Janelle, tell me a little bit about your journey and where you grew up, your childhood.
So I actually am a California girl. Okay. I grew up in Northern California in the Central Valley. A lot of people don't know the Central Valley, but it's sort of between Sacramento and Fresno, a small town called Turlock is where I grew up. So my parents were first generation here. My grandparents immigrated over in the 40s and 50s. So I grew up in a very close-knit family. My grandparents had a dairy. My other grandparents lived up near San Francisco, had a small gardening business. Grew up with those, you hear about those first generation immigrant values. That was my family, right? It was work hard to be better than the previous generation. We grew up very, very simple, right? We lived in a small house. My parents, my dad was a teacher. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She eventually went back to teaching, which was her passion. But they put us all through Catholic school, the best schools that they could. And they made a lot of sacrifices for us to really have the opportunities that we did. So I'm the oldest of four. Okay. I have a sister and a brother that we're all kind of 5 years apart, and then a younger brother who's 13 years younger. So when I went to college down here in LA, he went to kindergarten. So it's kind of crazy because we have a different relationship, more of a mentor-mentor, mentee relationship than really growing up in the same house together. But really close-knit family.
And you went to school right right over here.
There. I know. I love that we're filming here because it's like a full circle moment for me. So I was the first one to go away to college, and I came to Loyola Marymount, and we looked at a lot of different schools and had opportunities to go back to the East Coast and, you know, different things. But I really liked Loyola. You know, coming from a small town and a smaller school, I loved that it had that same vibe. Yeah. It was maybe 4,000 students at the time. It was a Catholic university. So it felt a lot like where I had gone to high school. And it was a big deal to move from a small town to LA, right? And I think
it's an incredible school.
Oh my God, I loved it. It was an incredible school, and it gave me almost that like cushion of moving to a big city, but still having this sense of community, right? That you could fall back on. And I think one of my most memorable moments was moving into my first dorm, which is like right up there on the hill. And we looked out of the window and you could see the Hollywood sign.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like opportunity is here, right? Yeah. Like that's like the whole thing with Hollywood is like you can write your story. And it just like always stuck with me. And just kind of the whole time that I was in school there, I'm like, okay, like this is my chance to like take everything I can from this and, you know, be successful.
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting my first job when I graduated with Enterprise Rent-A-Car right here in Marina Del Rey was my first office. It's down the street. And I worked for about 10 years at Enterprise. I always say it's where I grew up in my professional career because it was, I don't know how much you know about Enterprise, but they have a great management training program. And they're all about, you know, every year to 18 months, you're getting promoted to the next role. So I always kind of joke that it sort of ruined my like approach to work because I'm like, oh my gosh, where's the next opportunity? My whole career has been like, what's next? What's next? But it was fantastic. I mean, I worked with some really great people. I learned a lot at that company. It's where I first got to be a manager, where I first got to be a leader, just got to do a lot of cool things, build some really cool new divisions. So I actually got to build out our luxury car program, which I don't know if you ever have seen the exotics by Enterprise at the airports now.
Yeah, we ended up with a minivan, but I asked them for the exotic.
You're like, can I get the Ferrari that's right there? So I helped build that and start that here with one branch in LA, in West LA. So it was really a cool opportunity to be there. And you know, that whole piece of being part of that startup feel, right? Because it was a bit of a startup in a very big private company is what got me excited about going to Clearwire and taking that opportunity where you and I met. So I left after 10 years to go to a tech startup and do that, build markets and build something new and different. And that's what got me to Portland, Oregon, where we met. So did that for about 3 years. And then, as you know, we were just growing like gangbusters, right? I had a couple different roles within Clearwire. And then when they eventually sold to Sprint, I kind of made the decision. I was like, I'm not really passionate about telecom. Like I was passionate about a startup, but I don't know if that's really what I want to do. And that's how I landed in staffing. I actually ended up at Manpower for the first couple of years before Adecco. And it was all because our president of the organization at the time, a man named Jonas Priesing, was on CNBC talking about the jobs report. And here I was being like, I don't know what I want to do next. I'm going to watch the jobs report and see what he has to say. I didn't even know what a staffing company was. Like I didn't know what they did. And so I called up Manpower. I mean, this is like total salesperson, right? I called their headquarters in Milwaukee and I was like, do you have openings in California? And they're like, people don't usually call and ask that. I'm like, well, I saw Jonas on CNBC and it looks like you have great opportunities. Who can I talk to? And that turned into me getting hired as the RVP in Los Angeles.
That's amazing.
And they actually hired me to help them build out their small medium business team because, you know, I was doing that at Clearwire as well. But I didn't know anything about the staffing industry. So kind of the first role I went into was literally being in the field, learning what we do. How do we recruit people? How do we work with organizations? I sat side by side, this poor recruiter for 90 days.
I did always know you were a great recruiter after you pulled me out of that Sears. So
I know, it was a natural, right? So it was fun. I got to learn like really from the bottom up what the staffing industry was all about. And when I made the move to Adecco, it was actually because of Joyce Russell, who was the president of the Adecco US organization. And I had left Manpower and I didn't even know if I wanted to stay in staffing. And I got introduced to her through the interview process. And she has been an incredible mentor of mine throughout my whole career. And I don't know if you ever have those moments where you sit down with somebody in an interview and you're like, I have to work for this person. Like, I don't even care what the role is. Like, I need to work for you. And that's how she was with me. And I have never regretted it a day since. That's like, she was just an incredible advocate for women. She gave me so many opportunities. I mean, the 10 years that I was at Adecco, I had 6 different positions.
Amazing.
I know, it was really cool. I got to move out to Canada. I ran our Canadian business. I had multiple roles running organizations within the US, sales teams, international, global exposure, exposure with our board of directors, just really, really unique opportunities that I credit Joyce for like getting me in front of the right people. And I think really being an advocate, right?
Yeah.
She really helped me kind of move up in that organization. So
that's amazing.
And that's what led me to my current role at Employee Bridge, right? So like you said, it's the largest light industrial organization in the US. And I kind of intentionally made that decision to go to a company that wasn't a global publicly traded organization because I wanted to learn about private equity.
Okay.
So I had Joyce actually years ago tell me, I said, I want to be a CEO.
Yeah.
She's like, you will be a CEO.
Wow.
She's like, but what you need to do is write down what it means to be a CEO.
Yeah.
And start looking at that bumped up against your resume and understand what boxes you need to tick.
That's amazing advice. And just hearing that from somebody saying you will be a CEO, there's a lot of power in that. I remember being really early in my career and, I think I was an account manager at the time, and Dan Gillen, one of my mentors, he told me, he's like, you'll be a director. And I kind of looked at him crazy, but just that, relaying a message like that and instilling that belief.
That confidence, right?
Confidence,
of like, I can do this.
I can do it. And if this person says it, then maybe I can. So that's amazing.
It was awesome. Really cool because as I was looking at my list, I'm like, you know what? If I want to do this, I don't know anything about private equity. I have this opportunity in front of me. This is going to give me something new to check off my list, which was how I made the decision, right? There are a lot of factors went into it, but that was a big one of like, how am I going to grow from this opportunity?
What would you say are some of your biggest career milestones?
My first career milestone was getting promoted to my first manager role. And you probably feel this way about your first time leading people too, and moving from individual contributor to a team. I don't know about you, but I was terrible when I was first a leader. Awful, right? Like I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. And like, you have to learn. It's a finesse to lead people and manage people. And so I learned a lot from that role. And I had a great mentor at the time named Carl Winston. And I recently did a keynote actually. And I talked about Carl because at the time I didn't realize how impactful he was on my career. And now reflecting on a lot of those milestones and things that happened, he was one of the first people that sat me down and told me, hey, you're not great at this. And here's what you can do about it.
Wow.
And that's like very humbling.
Yeah, that honesty.
Yes, that honesty. And that, sometimes you need to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That what do you need to work on instead of everybody just telling you you're great.
Yeah.
And so he was a really tough manager.
Yeah.
But he made me so much better. And so I really look at that. He gave me my first opportunity in leadership, but then he also helped me get the next and the next, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was one big milestone. I think another one was one of my opportunities at Adecco was moving from kind of a regional vice president into a VP of sales for the US. And I was also kind of a country practice lead for a global part of the practice. Wow. So it gave me this incredible exposure. And Joyce actually was the one that promoted me into that role.
Wow.
And that was a huge milestone for me because it taught me about how to start navigating outside of your current role. It really taught me about like, okay, there's not only the role that's at hand here, but I also have a responsibility now as an influencer in the organization.
Yeah.
It was the first time I felt empowered to start kind of pulling people up alongside me, to really start reaching out and mentoring people and figuring out how you create leaders within an organization.
Yeah.
I have this Gandhi quote up in my office that I love. And it's like, the sign of a true leader is not about what you do as a leader, it's about how many leaders you develop below you. And that was the role where I first learned how important that was. Like as a leader yourself, that you need to really give back and invest in people.
And there's nothing more powerful. Like to me, that's brought me the most joy throughout my career. I mean, I think about people like you that have taken a chance on me and worked with me and, seeing my career where it's at today. And we were just talking earlier, right? It's like you hit this certain point and, that becomes such a much larger part of, your day to day and just your role as how do I help others? And naturally, I think when you take that approach, people follow you, right? People want to work for you. And that's when I've seen some of the best results in my career is when I've been focused on, again, developing that next set of leaders and building that leadership culture.
I agree. And I think intentionally doing that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times too, and I know you, as you were coming up your career, you feel this way too, like something sort of just happened, right? And then you look back at it and you're like, that was actually a pivotal moment.
Right.
And here's what I can learn from it. And I feel like the more you can be intentional about that, of really trying to like develop people and help bring up those leaders, it makes you better.
Yeah.
It's like that mentoring goes both ways.
You're right.
And so I felt like I've become a better leader the more intentional I've been about doing that in my career.
Right. And I think that's something I tell you, like, I really value about conversations, right? Is I'm getting an opportunity to go back and talk to people that have mentored me over the years, and I'm uncovering learnings that I'm bringing back, during my day-to-day. Obviously, you've been a big advocate for women in leadership. What would you say are some of the key differences between when you started versus today for women in leadership? Because I even think about when we started, like the world is a lot different, right?
So different. Yeah. Do you ever watch some like shows or movies from like the early 2000s and you're like, oh my gosh, that wasn't that long ago and that would not fly now, right? So it's changed a lot. I think it's been really interesting. I have a lot of mentors and women that I reach out to that are both older and younger than me in their careers. And so it's really interesting to kind of answer this question kind of through that perspective, because I think the women that have come ahead, you kind of look at like being able to stand on their shoulders for a lot of the road that they paved and how difficult it was for them to not be able to be authentic, not be able to really have a voice, to have to, I remember being told early in my career that if you want to be successful, you can't be viewed as both likable and competent. So always choose competent. Okay. So don't let people like you because that'll never get you anywhere. Right. But that was real. It was a woman saying like, you need to know this. Like people don't talk about this. It felt like it was very, cutthroat, and women didn't really even stand up for each other. Right. Because everybody was trying to just figure it out and nobody talked about it. Where I feel like things have changed now, especially as I've been coming up through my careers, I feel like people are much more willing to help. Like I watched it happen as I've started to work with people. I mean, I look at the people above me, like they want to pass along this knowledge and they feel like they can. They feel like it's not a secret anymore, right? Like we can talk about this being hard, because before it seemed like it was,
you don't want to be weak.
You don't want to be weak. But now it's like, no, that's truly what it is. Like we need to honor that. We need to teach people to have the confidence, not have the imposter syndrome. Let's talk about these things. So for me, that's been a big shift, because just even voicing it and allowing people to maybe be uncomfortable about it and talk about it, I think is what's allowing women to figure out what to do differently.
You've mentioned some of your mentors, but tell me about some of your most impactful mentors along the way.
So Joyce, again, was a huge advocate for me. And one of the best things that she did, so she is a powerhouse. I mean, she is just incredible. And she really leads a leadership style of generosity. So she is very much about giving back and she talks about the cherry on top. How can everything be a cherry on top experience? And so I was talking with her at like a national meeting, and she had just come back from Davos. So she was our representative at Davos speaking about women in the workplace. And I said to her, how do I get to be Joyce who goes to Davos? And she kind of laughed it off. And I was like, I'm actually being serious. Like, what did you do to get to be at Davos on this global stage talking about women in business? Like, that's incredible. And she's like, are you serious? And I'm like, I am serious. I'm asking you because there are probably things you've done in your career, maybe things that happen by accident, but I'm sure there's advice that I would love to learn from, right? And I'm not asking you to take on a formal mentorship or anything like that, but, I'd love some thoughts on that. And she's like, okay, I'm going to get back to you. She came back to me a couple weeks later and she said, I have a good friend that C200 is a committee of 200. It's a invite-only, very prestigious women's networking organization.
I've seen this on your profile. I was going to ask you about it.
So I just became a member because Joyce nominated me about 9 months ago. And she was already part of this organization. And she said, I have a friend through C200 named Lorraine Siegel. She is starting something kind of similar to C200, but it's actually more meant for kind of mid-level career women who are at the level you're at, to really get partnered with somebody that can mentor them and really understand about how to be intentional in your career and what are some of the things that you can do. She goes, I'd like to sponsor you to be part of her first cohort if you're open to it. And I was like, okay, I won't let you down. Just like you said, right? To me, like, I won't let you down. I will do this. I will give it 100%. And it was probably one of the best things that could have ever happened, because it introduced me to Lorraine Siegel, who created this. And she partnered me with a woman named Linda Del Rey, who is still my mentor now. And she's led Fortune 500 companies. She ran Giorgio Armani. She's done all sorts of incredible things. And she is one of my closest friends and just somebody that I know I can go to for the real gut check. When you need it.
She'll be honest with you.
Oh, brutally honest. I mean, she'll tell me things I don't want to hear, but that's what I count on her to do. And so it's like Joyce started this domino effect of things that happened by that conversation and just the way that she reacted and helped me in that moment, and then started to connect me. And I mean, she introduced me to multiple people down the road that have now become great mentors, but it all was because of her.
That's amazing.
And so when I think about like the most impactful people in my career, I would have to credit that to her.
Just amazing to hear about that story. And, you know, again, I'm like so proud to know you and see where you're at today, and just thankful to have a relationship with you. Because when I think about my girls, right, like as they're getting older, I want them to develop these, you know, strong mentor type relationships with women in business. And again, you're somebody that's always inspired me and that I've respected. What unique skills do you feel women bring to leadership and to the workplace in general?
I'm going to speak about Joyce for a minute again. That whole spirit of generosity. Thoughtfulness. I'm not saying guys aren't thoughtful. But the amount of times I have to remind my husband when there's something coming up and we need to get a gift is different than women who are just like naturally think that way. I do think that there's a level of softness and thoughtfulness that women bring to the workplace. And I think it's a balance. It's always a balance, right? Because you have to balance that with the likable and competent thing, right? Like you have to balance those pieces out. But I do think that women just have that kind of spirit of generosity, and they do want to give back, and they do want to help. That's different. It's unique. And I think it's something we should own and be proud of. I also think too, that being a mom, and most people are, you know, if you're a working mother, you're balancing a lot of things. You're a working parent, right? So this isn't just women only, but I think parents in general have to balance so many pieces and really learn how to prioritize and figure out how to be excellent at both. And I do think that women kind of bring that skill to the table as well, where there's a lot that goes into being a very high level executive role. That I think, you know, comes from that planning and execution, and being the CEO of your household while also being the CEO or a high powered level role, and mixing those two together is a unique skill set.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not a lot of people can balance those. And again, I think you have to be very intentional about it and thoughtful in your approach. One thing you said that I think is important to kind of back up to and just make sure we capture, but you talked about just reaching out, right? And saying like, I want to be that, right? And to me, it's having the confidence to go have that conversation and being vulnerable enough to be able to say, hey, you know, this is what I want to do. And it's amazing, you know, how many people are willing to stop and say, hey, I'll work with you, or I'll spend time with you. But you have to get outside your comfort zone and have to have that conversation. I know you talked a little bit about, you know, Joyce inspiring you, but what specifically inspired you to get into leadership?
My parents always tell this story. When I was a kid, I wanted to be the president of the United States. And so, and it was because I wanted to be like in charge of people. Like I wanted to lead. Like I was just that kid that always wanted to be leading things, right? Like, I know your daughter's a little bit like this too, right? They just like want to be in charge of things. And, you know, we used to have this chocolate fundraiser, World's Finest Chocolate, that we'd have to sell. I always say it was my first sales job, because I'd like grab my sister who was 2 years younger, and I'd be like, okay, here's our contest. Can you sell more? Can I sell more? Here's the pitch. Like literally at 7 years old, I was like creating a sales pitch. I just always gravitated towards that. And so as I was kind of moving through school, even in college, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. Like I loved, and I actually laugh about it because I think in sales, it's a lot of the same stuff, right? Like I loved to be able to just talk with people and sell them on a concept, sell them on an idea. And I interned at a law firm, and I was like, oh, this is not for me. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. Maybe that's not what I want to do. And so I started really kind of soul searching about what it was that I liked. And I realized I was always in leadership roles, like my whole, you know, high school, college career. And I just loved leading people. And I'm like, I don't know exactly how to get into that. I know it's something to do with business, and I know that I want to be a people leader. So how do I do that? And my friend was working at Enterprise, and she's like, they've got a great management training program. It's perfect if you don't quite know what you want to do. I think it's going to give you the skills to come in for a year or two and figure out how you do that. And 2 years later, I was managing a team. And I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. I love it.
It's amazing. And just hearing you talk about being a kid and selling, and my daughter Monroe, she's got a dog treat business right now, and she makes the dog treats. She plans to go down to the park. She worked on her whole pitch, and
she's a little entrepreneur. Look at that.
She's going to be a killer. So
and
I'm
she's
excited
11, right?
She's 11.
She is a natural leader. Everything you have told me about her, she's going to be.
She's going to be scary.
Incredible.
And then Skyler, it's funny because Skyler's a lot more like me, like with people, and so is Monroe. They both got it all. They're going to be scary when they get in the workforce. I'm excited about it.
That is amazing.
So, what do you feel are some of the biggest challenges today for women in leadership?
You talked about confidence.
Yeah.
And being able to ask, right? And I know the word imposter syndrome gets thrown around a lot, but it's an important concept because I think that women lack confidence.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of years of people not being able to talk about these things. And so there's being able to give women confidence in the workplace, to me, is probably the very best thing that we can pass along.
That's amazing.
Making people feel brave.
Yeah.
Feeling vulnerable enough to raise your hand or ask the question, because you don't get an answer if you don't ask, right? To your point, if I don't ask somebody for help, nobody's going to volunteer it. Maybe they will, but I have to ask.
Yeah.
I think that to me is probably the biggest challenge that women come up against, is that they don't have a voice yet. A lot of times women haven't figured out how to have that authentic voice. And so I always say to any women that I talk to, you got to be brave.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out what that voice is and then own it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've seen the Barbie movie monologue where she's talking about like, well, we have to do this, but we can't do this. And, it's like you try to be everything to everybody and it's impossible.
Right.
I think that rings very true. And so especially for women in the workplace, you have to figure out who you are and own it. Because you're not going to be everything to everybody. And that's what I think sort of diminishes it and confuses people. Know who you are, own it, be authentic about it, be brave about it.
Yeah.
That's what's going to get you where you need to go.
I love that you said that. And, even as a male leader, like we have a responsibility to be able to instill that confidence in women as they're coming up the ranks.
I think too, Skyler, to that point, I've worked with some really incredible males who are very empowering for women too.
Yeah.
And it's because of that.
Right.
They let them have a voice. They let them have that authenticity. I think that it's critical for everybody in the workplace to rally around that because it's not just a women issue, right? I think that everybody needs to have that confidence. And you sort of gain that confidence the longer you're in your career, right? And you learn from your mistakes and you start to realize, okay, I can be a little more bullish on that because I know how to handle it. But I do think it's a responsibility for leaders across the board is we have to be able to give people the opportunity to fail and be comfortable failing so that they can learn from that and be able to use that and grow from that. Because anybody is a leader. If you work for a leader that allows you to do that, you're going to have confidence.
Absolutely. I know we touched on it a little bit earlier in the conversation, but what is your approach to really balancing your professional and personal responsibilities as a mother?
I'm going to use the word intentional again.
Okay. Yeah.
I've had to really learn this. So please don't think this is something I've been doing my whole career.
Yeah.
It's recent, but I finally feel like I have figured out that it's not necessarily balance. I really feel you've got to sway.
Yeah.
I actually met somebody that talked about this work-life sway, and Joanne Lublin, I was featured in one of her books. We had this whole thing about power moms.
Look at you. You're in books and you're giving keynotes. And
it was really, I was so humbled when she asked me, by the way. It was really cool because she interviewed, talk about imposter syndrome, all of these incredible women that I'm like, oh my gosh, I aspire to be them. I can't believe I'm being included in this. But she has this concept about work-life sway. And the idea is that when you sway to work, you are 100% intentional and committed to work. Yeah. And when you sway to home, it's the same thing there.
I love that.
So I'm not checking emails on the weekend.
Yeah.
Like if I'm on PTO, I am on PTO. Yeah. And I talk a lot about this at work. Do not make it pretend time off. It is real time off. Yeah. And if you need to check, because sometimes that is a reality, set times, set boundaries.
Yep.
Set the boundaries as to what that's going to look like on the weekend and communicate that with your kids. Yeah. So I think that's been another big thing is that my kids understand that now. Like, hey, I have this play coming up. Okay, well, I didn't know about that ahead of time. I'm not sure if that's reality, if I can be there, but let's talk about what the next one's going to look like and what I can do. And I think that communication with family and that intentional devotion to time has made a big difference.
Well, and I think that's something that's even changed over the last 10 years is, people are understanding that is needed. Right. Yeah. And, I think about you 10 years ago, there wasn't any balance.
There was no boundaries. I don't care how hard we tried to create boundaries. There was no boundaries.
What advice would you give, to women that are coming up, or, even just think about your girls or my girls? What advice would you give to them?
2 pieces to that. I think owning your voice. You need to own who you are and be authentic in that. And I even say that to my girls now. My oldest daughter is dyslexic. And I think that sometimes gives her a little bit of shake in her confidence, right? Sure. And so really trying to help her understand how you can own that as a superpower, right? Yeah. Versus feeling like it's different. Yeah. And I think that rings true all the way through our careers, right? Is that how do we help people uncover what their superpowers are, be really confident in that, and own it, right? So that you can be successful. I think the other thing that's important, and this is a concept I've really kind of learned over the last few years, is that especially kind of when I was talking about enterprise, like go, 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 what's that next promotion, climb the career ladder. Career ladder works both ways, right? As you're climbing up, sometimes you're getting pulled up, but you also have a responsibility to reach down and pull up alongside you. And that to me is something I've really tried to devote time to over the last few years, is how do you do that? Right? Whether it's within your organization, whether it's outside the organization, like how do you intentionally try to bring people up alongside you? So I think that's important. I think we have a responsibility as women to make sure we're doing that.
Was there ever a time where you felt like maybe you weren't being taken seriously as a female leader? And, do you feel like you had to work harder at times to be successful?
Yeah, absolutely. And, so many times that I have felt that way. Yeah. And I think some of it is maybe being young in your career too. Sure. Not confident in your career. Okay. But there have definitely been times with as much as things have changed. Yeah. I've had those moments where you are sitting in a situation and maybe you're thinking like, oh, I'm so lucky. I haven't had these horror stories that some of the women ahead of me tell. Right. And then you're in a situation, I remember being in one specifically where I was sitting there going, oh my gosh, it is literally happening to me right now. Yeah. And you have to keep your calm and compose yourself, because you can't be too emotional in how you react to something, even if it's completely unfounded. But I think that I've had to learn to also temper emotion and be very factual in how you react to some of those things, because you won't get taken seriously if you're viewed as an emotional female. Yeah. Right? That's just one stereotype that I think is very prevalent, that you have to be very calculated about, right? Because you can't be the likable and competent. It goes back to that, right? So yes, I do think that there have been a lot of times in my career where I maybe haven't been taken as seriously, sometimes for being female, sometimes because I was young in my role, right? Yeah. So I think it's a mix of both, but it's still real. There's still a lot of times when situations happen that I just have to bite my tongue, right? And say, I can't believe that in the year of 2024, this is happening right now, right? Appreciate you sharing that. And, it's something that I think as most female leaders that we talk to would share that they've experienced at some point throughout their career. Yeah. And so I think just talking about it and sharing about it, there's power in that, knowing that others are going through it. I do too. I think that's actually another big thing, like in terms of advice for other females, is that we have to talk about it. Right. It's, the more that you talk about it, the more you realize it's not just you. Right. And, I've had people reach out to me before and say, look, they've had the courage to ask, hey, can I talk to you about this? Because I'm experiencing something within the organization. I feel like it's biased or whatever, and I just want to talk it through with another female. Yeah. And the fact that they even ask makes me so happy, right? Because I'm like, I might not be able to offer you advice, but please just use me as a sounding board. So you're right. We have to talk about it. As somebody that obviously I admire, what advice do you have for me as a parent and leader? You know what? I think I love that question. Great parents make great leaders. Yeah. I mean, and you probably feel this with your kids too, right? Like there's just so much as a parent that we do about empowering our kids. And it even goes back to the whole letting them fail and learn from their experiences and giving them confidence and, making sure that they have a safe space to learn and grow, right? And holding them accountable. Yep. Everything I just said makes you a great leader too, right? Those are the things that help you build great teams, is when you're able to create a safe environment where people have psychological safety, where they feel like they can come to you with ideas and that it's okay to fail and learn from that. and accountability and expectations. I mean, it's the same.
Yeah.
So I really do, and you are a fantastic leader, fantastic parent.
Thank you.
And I think those are some of the things that you'd probably agree, like you do in both your work and personal life, right?
It's interesting you say that, because I've never necessarily thought about it in that way, but you're absolutely right.
Isn't it true though?
It is. It's very true. I noticed you brought some books, and I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to share some of those today.
Well, you were asking me about some of the things that when other female leaders maybe come to you, like advice that you might give.
Yeah.
There are 2 books that I always recommend. And so sometimes if somebody asks me to be their mentor, I'll send them these books.
Yeah.
So, the first one is called Unapologetically Ambitious.
Love it.
Okay, I'm sure you can tell why I love this book, because I do feel like as females, if you want to go far, you need to be unapologetic about it.
Okay.
What I love about Shelley's book, so this was actually somebody that I met through somebody else. I didn't really know her. And then as part of C200, I actually got to meet her in person this last October. That's amazing. I was such a fangirl. It was probably a little embarrassing. It's like, oh my gosh, I've read your book. I give it to everybody. But what I love, her message in here is like, if you want to be successful, don't apologize for that. Own it.
Yeah.
And do something about it and create a plan and get there. And she's just so raw and authentic about that. I just love it. Yeah. So, a lot of times people come to me and they are a little bit unsure and they don't have that courage yet. And I just feel like this book helps bring it out.
That's awesome.
So it's one of my favorites. And then another one that I recommend. So we're talking about Joyce. She's written a book called Put a Cherry on Top. Okay. And it's all about generosity in life and leadership. And I just feel like she's such a special person because she truly is always thinking about how to put that cherry on top and how to give a little bit extra. And it's made her a really unique leader. And I feel like if we can just bring a little pepper of that, a little sprinkle of that into everything that we do, it really makes you incredible as a leader, as a parent, as a person. So these 2 books.
Can I borrow that one?
Yes, of course, of course.
I'd love to read it on the flight back. And
yes.
Thank you. I
Absolutely. I'll give them both. They're incredible.
Final question here. And I'm asking this, to individual where I think it fits. And I just want to ask you, in the future, as my girls grow up, would you be willing to be a mentor and an advocate for them? Because to me, I always think about, my childhood and growing up, and I watched my father build a lot of connections and honestly burn a lot of bridges. And the one thing that I'm trying to do as a dad is, as my girls grow, I'm trying to connect them with a network of people that are going to be able to give them a similar experience to I got early on in my career. And there's nobody that I think would be better for that than you.
Thank you. I'm like very humbled that you even asked that. And the answer is, of course, yes. Yeah. I get so much out of mentoring and advocating for women, especially when it's people that I know. Yeah. So I 100% would love to do that. So please reach out.
Thank you so much. And I just want to tell you, thank you again, because this was a day that I was really looking forward to.
Me too, and Skyler.
It's been too long. 15 years is too long. But again, thank you for everything you've done for me.
You're welcome. Thank you for everything you've given back to me and for including me in this. It's been awesome.
Yeah, I was surprised. I told you this when we were standing there, but it's been really humbling, the amount of people I've reached out to. I mean, you think, like, I haven't seen you in 15 years. And just to call you and have you go, yep, where do we need to be? And what are we talking about? And, I don't take that lightly. So thank you so much.
I think it says a lot about you, though. That everybody is reacting in that way. It means a lot, right? Like I would do anything. Like you were always such a great person. And even if I haven't talked to you in 15 years, I'm like, of course, what do you need? I'll drop everything and come. And I think that's what you're seeing, because you've made an impact on a lot of people too. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Conversations. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with some more exciting guests. Thank you.